Hey guys, Alex here from the DMs Club on the Titan Bear Gaming YouTube channel. In today's episode, I'm diving into Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Now, we got Xanathar's Guide released to the public about a week ago, and since then, everybody's been going crazy over it, and it's easy to see why. The name doesn't disappoint. There is everything in this thing. You've got new character options, additional archetypes, you've got new magic spells, new magic items, helpful tips and tricks for making your character backstories more rich and more believable. And lastly, the thing that I want to talk about, some additional rules for Dungeon Masters. That's what we're covering in today's video. But before we get too far into it, I am going to be doing a giveaway this video. We do have a giveaway announcement, so look forward to that at the very end. So let's not waste any time. Go ahead and grab your Xanathar's book and open up to page 77. So here we're looking at Chapter 2, Dungeon Masters Tools. Now, they add a lot of really great stuff in here, and I'm going to cover most of this in future videos. Today, I'm just going to talk about two of them that I think are really significant and help answer a lot of questions that existing Dungeon Masters may have. We're going to talk about the falling rules, and we're going to talk about the sleep rules. So let's look at falling first. Now, as a baseline, falling is generally arbitrated in the game as whoever falls takes damage at the end of their turn based on how high they fell from, and that's 1d6 bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet that they fell. They also land prone unless they have some way to mitigate taking damage from the fall. This is generally fine for most cases, but once you start throwing flying creatures into the mix, things start to get a little bit wonky. Now go ahead and head over to the top of page 77. We're going to look at the subsection called Flying Creatures and Falling. This deals with a rather common situation that shows up in the game, and that is when you or one of your friends at the table has an ability that's supposed to knock the enemy prone, usually if they fail a saving throw or something else along these lines. The Battle Master for the fighter has this ability. They've got a maneuver that lets them knock enemies prone, as well as the Gunslinger from Matt Mercer's Tal'Dorei campaign guide also has the ability to knock creatures prone. What happens when they use that against a flying creature? What does it even mean for a flying creature to be knocked prone? Do they do a flip in the air? What happens to them? This section finally gives a little bit of an explanation about what that's supposed to look like in the game. The very first paragraph explains it very well. A flying creature in flight falls if it is knocked prone, if its speed is reduced to 0 feet, or if it otherwise loses the ability to move. The only exceptions to this are if that creature is flying as a result of the fly magical spell, or if it's got some kind of passive ability to hover. But generally, if you're dealing with a creature that is flying as a result of its own natural wings, if that creature gets knocked prone, or if its movement gets reduced to 0, he's falling, and that means that creature is falling to the ground. Basically, they're talking about prone as an effect having kind of a similar consequence as stunning a flying creature, right? If this creature is no longer thinking correctly, then it's going to fall to the ground because it's not flapping right. And it's basically, the game is basically saying that prone condition should inflict that kind of circumstance upon that enemy. But it's not a full stun because otherwise it would be a stun. And so maybe it makes sense to give that creature a little bit of a benefit to not take quite so much damage when they hit the ground. Maybe they snap out of it as they're falling, and so they can take some kind of action to glide or to flap their wings or something along those lines to reduce their damage as they hit the ground. In order to achieve that, the suggestion here is to take the flight speed of the creature and subtract it from the altitude that the creature falls from. So that way the creature takes a little bit less damage as it tries to right itself on its way to the ground. Now there's one more section in this Flying Creatures and Falling that is worth talking about, which is this last piece that says, if you use the rule for rate of falling, which I didn't mention just now, but I'm about to in a second, if the creature is still falling after one turn, which means it's falling from a tall distance, it has the ability to right itself and to stop its fall, to end its descent and hover in place by spending half of its movement speed. This is exactly like standing up from the prone condition, so this is nice and consistent with the rest of the rules. Now, what is the rate of falling? Before the printing of this book, we didn't have an explicit number for how fast people fell. Yeah, you could use things from previous editions, but you were always wondering in the back of your mind whether it was tuned correctly for 5th edition and things like this. And it also resulted in Dungeon Masters simply going over to Wikipedia and looking up things like human terminal velocity or the terminal velocities of other objects and winging it, trying to figure out how fast do they want to do it, how do they actually arbitrate this at their own gaming table, how do they manage this kind of thing, and it comes up a lot. This thing does happen a lot. I've had this happen 2 or 3 times in my own games. It's happened in most internet stream games that I think I've watched, and in 2 of the live games that I've physically gone to attend and be a spectator in, like Critical Role Live and in Maze Arcana. a falling situation has happened where the dungeon master has had to just wing it. They've had to rely on their own prior experiences to run a falling situation correctly. Now, because it's printed here, we know that in 5th edition, when you fall from a great height, you fall 500 feet per round, and that fall happens instantly at the end of your turn. The text continues by saying that if at the end of the round you have not yet hit the ground, on the next turn you also fall 500 feet. So you're going to fall at a constant 500 feet per round as you're falling until you finally hit the ground. This is really helpful. 500 feet per round helps us give us a baseline that we can calibrate other movement speeds like flying speeds to figure out how we arbitrate confusing circumstances like when someone falls and their friend who can fly decides to dive after them and try to rescue them. Now, to try to arbitrate that situation, you could take the rules exactly as they're written right here and say that all falling creatures move at 500 feet per round, but that could be a little bit unwieldy. In that case, if you've got somebody chasing after a falling ally, then you're going to use their flight speed to try and overcome this 500-foot difference or 1,000-foot difference, depending on how long it was between the person fell and when the ally dove after them to try and rescue them. Trying to overcome 500 feet or 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet when you're only moving at a movement speed of 30 feet per round or 60 feet per round is a daunting task that's going to take several rounds of combat. In 5th edition, games don't last several rounds. In 5th edition, combats are only usually 3 rounds, maybe 5 rounds, 7 on the very longest. You can't afford to take 5 to 7 rounds to simply go chase your friend and see if you save them or not. Now, I would arbitrate that situation a little bit differently. Instead of simply having the flyer who is trying to catch their friend who's falling make up the difference 30 feet at a time or 60 feet at a time, I would instead head over to Wikipedia and look up the fact that there is a difference in terminal velocity for human beings, whether they are limbs spread open, trying to slow their descent as much as possible, versus if their arms are tucked in and their head down, plummeting in a nosedive as fast as they possibly can. Fortunately, Wikipedia defines this for us. Don't worry about what the actual velocities are. They don't match with what's written here for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but we can use the ratio of the two, and roughly the ratio is 2 to 1. If you are tucked in and head first and plummeting down as fast as you can, you are moving at twice the movement speed of someone that is limbs wide open and trying to slow their own descent. I would then take that 2 times ratio and use the 500 feet per round rule that we now have from Xanathar's guide. Make it so that the person who is falling moves at 500 feet per round, and the person that is chasing them moves independent of their own movement speed. They just move at a flat 1,000 feet per round because they're actively trying to move as fast as possible to catch up to their friend. You can throw in things like a acrobatics check to be able to actually manage this or to guide their fall or whatever, and that's great. That's a wonderful way to go about doing it. But from a speed matching perspective, this completely moves you away from the amount of movement speed that the chaser has from whatever flight faculty they've got. It doesn't matter how fast their flight speed is because they are falling in a directed fashion. And from a realism perspective, I think it actually makes a fair bit of sense by Wizards deciding to list the falling movement speed as 500 feet per round. It basically says that your normal movement speed of 30 or 60 or whatever your flight speed is irrelevant in terms of your ability to go catch up to your friend that's falling and you're trying to go save them. And it basically defines the situation as your ally starts to fall, you want to go rescue them, you fall to catch up to them, you take hold of them, you catch them, and then using the same rules for a prone flying character, you then use half of your movement speed, or as I would arbitrate it in this case, all of your movement speed, because you're now holding on to a person's body and you're now loaded down. Use your movement speed to get up and to right your fall, to end your descent and resume your normal movement pattern. I think that's a perfectly fine way to arbitrate this situation, and if you do the rounds math, it ends up being that it only takes 1 round, 2 rounds, or maybe 3 rounds to actually execute on this, relative to whenever the person falls and how long it takes for you to then jump after them and try to save them. And I think that's good. I think it's about as much time as it takes to provide a degree of tension and to play that out in a satisfying way at the table. It wouldn't want to be any longer than that. It would take too long. Plus, you still have the detail that even after you've ended the fall, even after you've caught your friend and you have saved the day, you still need to get back. And depending on how far you fell to get there, that could take you a long while. So from a Dungeon Master perspective, this still has a significant impact on how a combat situation is going to play out. So on to the next section I want to talk about, sleep. Now, they provide some funny rules here for things like waking someone if they're in a natural sleep, what kind of perception scores do they need to have if they hear someone talking or whatever else. And that's cool. I'm not sure how much I would actually use that kind of thing at the table. I think mostly it's useful as kind of background knowledge for helping dungeon masters to understand what kinds of assumptions the game creators have in mind for how difficult it is for people to be heard when they're talking and things like this. The thing that I care about more in this section is the next part, sleeping in armor. Now, it says here that sleeping in light armor has no adverse effect on the wearer, but sleeping in medium or heavy armor makes it very difficult to recover fully during a long rest. I like this particular rule. It defines that if you finish a long rest when you're wearing medium or heavy armor, you regain only 1/4 of your spent hit dice, minimum of 1 die. Also, if you have any levels of exhaustion, the rest doesn't reduce your exhaustion level. Now, I think this one's a really big deal, and I think it's a big deal in a kind of a slightly different avenue than maybe what Wizards of the Coast was originally intending. Now, I've always felt like the long rest benefits, as they're listed in the player handbook, are a little bit soft on the players. As it's defined, the long rest gives your players back all of their hit points, half of their expend hit dice, as well as curing at least 1 level of exhaustion. Recovering all of your... I've never played with recovering all of your hit points. I think that it basically makes it so that if you can just get your characters to the next long rest, that they're going to be fine. And I feel like that lets up on tension a little bit too much. It makes it a little bit too easy. It also encourages players to try taking long rests outdoors. They try to take a long rest when they're in the middle of the snake temple, or they're, on some other plane of existence and they've spent their spell slots. They think that this long rest is this immediate reprieve that they should be trying to do as much as possible. And it's unrealistic, right? It bothers me from a realism perspective. No, being outside and being in an adventuring setting is a dangerous thing. And the only mechanism that 5th edition gives you to try and turn the crank up a little bit in terms of your difficulty setting is to subject them to random encounters. And I think that subjecting them to random encounters as much as possible mostly just pits the dungeon master against the players. Now, I will caveat that by saying that Matt Colville presents a really great way to handle random encounters being used as a tool for turning up the difficulty and turning up the perceived level of threat of being out in the open world. Check out his video. I'll go ahead and list it here in the card section so you can see what he has to say about it. But it basically boils down to the following. He basically says that you should be including random encounters for how far the players end up traveling, and it should be proportional. They should have more random encounters. They should encounter more stuff the longer that they go, and that the stuff that they find in these random encounters, or if they do the thing where they try to take a rest inside a ruins or something like that, the stuff that they fight in these random encounters should be harder than the stuff that is otherwise planned for the adventure. And that's a good way to handle it. I think that's got a little bit of a slow effect to it. It'll take the players a couple of times of being subjected to these random encounters and figuring out that, dang, these things are really tough. We really don't want to be out here that long. And I think it should come back in just as a mechanic to the game. That's the whole point of mechanics. The whole point of mechanics is, yes, to arbitrate players being able to play with one another in a cooperative and successful manner, but it's also to help communicate certain story aspects. It's also to help communicate certain things about the setting of the game. If you want it to seem dangerous outside, there should be some rules that go along with it. So I actually think that we can take this medium and heavy armor rule and make our own house rule to help turn up the difficulty setting for players thinking that it's dangerous outside. I think the distinction that we want to drive home is the difference between taking a rest in a place where it is safe to do so versus where it is not safe to do so. And fortunately, the players already help manage this distinction for us. They usually have a sense of it, and they usually set a watch. So I think we add a custom rule to the concept of taking a watch. If a character takes a long rest in which they take a watch, they don't recover their hit points. They take the penalties that come from medium and heavy armor, as it's described here in Xanathar's, where they only recover 1/4 of their hit dice instead of the normal half. And if they have levels of exhaustion, they don't recover the level of exhaustion. If they take a long rest in which they don't take a watch, like you would be doing if you were sleeping in a nice bed inside a town, then you gain all the normal benefits of taking a long rest. full hit points, half of your hit dice come back, and you start to recover levels of exhaustion. I think this gives a nice little mini game that your party now has to start thinking about. You've got characters that are going to be better at taking watch than other characters, but now you've got characters that are going to find themselves having a higher need of taking a restful night of sleep even when you are out in the field. You're going to have characters that are really low on hit points, and you don't want to have to expend the spell slots to try and recover that from a healing magic perspective. You're going to have characters that have low hit dice. Maybe they've used all of their hit dice so far, and at worst, they've got levels of exhaustion that they need to start clearing up. This puts a critical decision to the table of who's going to take watch versus who has to not take watch that I think is missing from the game and will probably add a level of fun to the situation. One of the benefits of making this mechanic linked to whether or not a player's character takes watch is it does encompass the case where the players are in a town, but they don't trust the town. Maybe it's run by somebody that they don't like, or if they know that there are enemies somewhere within the city walls, that they would still want to take a watch and to keep guard while they're sleeping there. This still applies to that situation. I think this will also help divorce the players of this idea that they can just take long rests whenever they want or wherever they can manage to do so, and that's safety. I think that this helps push them towards the motivation that they should have, which is if they leave a position of safety in a town or in a city that they trust, that they should be hoping to get back to that as soon as possible, that so long as they are outside the city limits, they are not safe. I think this helps drive that level of tension. Now, like I said, this is a pretty strongly homebrewed rule concept, and I'm very curious to know what other people have to say, especially if you've run something like this at your own table. How did it go? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to know how this goes, and if you agree with the concept that long rests provide entirely too much benefit to your players. I think I'll end this video here. There's a lot of other really great stuff here in Xanathar's that I'm gonna cover in other videos, but I feel like it deserves additional videos because there's some really great things in here. I love the tool proficiencies, I love the encounter sections, I love the new archetypes, magic. There's so much stuff here that it really warrants spending the time and going through things in detail. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Look forward to those videos as those come out. Okay, let's go ahead and do our giveaway announcement. We're gonna do it a little bit differently this time. We're gonna do it this time as a sub-goal giveaway. So what that means is today we announce that we're doing the giveaway, and when we reach our sub-goal, that's when we'll actually execute on the giveaway. Now, as of today, we're in the low 30s from a subscriber perspective, and our sub-goal is 100. When we reach 100 subs, we will execute on doing our giveaway. Now, in order to enter into the giveaway, all you need to do is make a comment for this video. Leave a comment down below. You can say whatever you'd like, introduce yourself, tell me a funny story, whatever you want. Leave a comment down below and it'll enter you into the giveaway. And once we reach 100 subs, we'll pick a winner from the listing down below and you'll get the giveaway prize. Now, if you're not familiar with this kind of giveaway, what this basically means for you is in order to maximize your chances of being the winner of the giveaway, you want to help us reach 100 subs as quickly as possible. You want to share this video, other videos on our channel, share the channel link itself, like the video, tweet about it, do whatever you can to help us get to our sub goal as quickly as possible. The sooner we reach our sub goal, the fewer entries you have to contend with, the better chances you have for winning. What are we giving away this time? This time we're going to be giving away this deluxe Reaper Bones set. This one here is called Dragons Don't Share. This was one of the deluxe kits that they came out with back in 2014. I think it's actually kind of difficult to find now. I haven't had an easy time finding other copies of this one than just this guy here. But this one's a really awesome set. You've got this giant dragon inside of it. You've got 5 adventurers that come with it. There's this ruined tower structure that you also have, so you get this nice terrain. It's basically a full diorama in a box. It's a wonderful, wonderful set. It also has a couple of staircases of terrain in here as well. So there's a lot to like in this thing. So go ahead and leave us a comment down below to enter into the giveaway and help us reach our sub count. We're aiming for 100. We'll give this bad boy away when we reach that 100 number. Now, as I said before, I think the next video that's coming out is going to be the 103 entry in my Dungeon Mastery series, and that one's going to be about Dungeon Master prep, getting ready to run your very first session. What kinds of prep work do you need to do? So keep an eye out for that one. I'm also writing a player's role-playing primer in the background. I think that one's going to be coming out soon, too. There's a lot of folks that I talk to, both players and Dungeon Masters alike, that say that their players are interested in role-playing better or doing more role-playing, but they're not sure how. I want to give people some pointers on how exactly they can get into their characters, the kinds of things they can do as their characters to bring another degree of life to their characters at the table. So keep an eye out for those videos. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can know when those things do come out. Also find us over on social media at Titan Bear Gaming. We're on pretty much all social media outlets, so you can find us basically anywhere. We're pretty active. Come chat me up. Until next time I see you, have more fun, would ya? It's good for you.